Give us free. Give us free.
Your Honor, please instruct the defendant that he cannot disrupt these proceedings with such outbursts.
Give us free. Give us free.
If we are to have any semblance of orderliness,
Give us free.
Peace, unity, and welcome my conscious and unconscious family and friends. This is the all-new Black Village Community Podcast, and I am truly your host of the show, JC, aka Afro Black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut, without any fear, as I use my mic as a spear to chuck you with liberated truth. I am your host and your native soldier in the struggle. My purpose and mission for this show is first to enlighten, inform, and engage. And I want to engage with all who claim to know the truth. All truth seekers and my native family, I welcome you. This show is dedicated to all our indigenous native ancestors and to all those who've carried the mantle of truth, and to every person with the ability to throw off the chains of comfortable habit and unwarranted assumption and move in a new, liberated direction that is guided by truth and observational evidence, no matter where that direction may lead you. My main objective and purpose here is freedom, mind, soul, and spirit. That being said, welcome to the Black Village Community Podcast, and much love from our great universal goddess and mother of all living here and above.
AC in the house.
Aborigines, which means what? Black folks. But you never find a white aborigine. Rather, aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines, but you don't like to be called an aborigine. You want to be called an American.
You go to a reservation, you see poverty, you see churches, and you see liquor stores. When you go to any hood, you see poverty, you see churches, and you see liquor stores. So what make you think you're not on a reservation? Right? So all these achievements that we ascribe to African Americans, these are achievements by Native Americans who had to take on the identity of being African American because they was hanging us.
This means, in the case of an American Negro, it comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you, that the Indians were you, that the Indians were you, that the Indians were...
But you think they was hanging people because they was Africans. Africans just want to go home. Nigga from here want to take his shit over. But you think they was hanging people because they was Africans. Africans just want to go home. Nigga from here want to take his shit over, want to take his shit over.
Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us. The rock was landed on us. The rock was landed on us. The rock was landed on us.
Aboriginal people. 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 Aboriginal means the original inhabitant of a land from the earliest times. The ancient mound builders that built and designed the pyramids right here, not just by the Nile, contrary to popular belief in denial. Pyramids and huge hieroglyphics and pictographs on the ground are all mounds found around the Americas, North, Central, and South
even Venus and Mars. That is documented fact that emanates from my mouth. So who exactly were these aboriginals here, whose ancient evidence of residency is hesitantly mentioned in this hemisphere? Were they the stereotypical Native American so-called Red Indians? Well then, let's be clear, ask any of their tribes if they're sincere. They'll tell ya those mounds predate their origins. Our past was erased and replaced with lies. Our achievements and identity plagiarized. We got amnesia of who we are, but we go way back further than the seats in your car.
Aboriginal people, 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 Aboriginal people.
This is how we ride and roll. Soldier for life for sure.
Hey, this is JC, aka Afro Black, and I am here with you for another delicious Black Sunday. Hey. I love what I do, and that's why I do what I do, because I am a truth seeker. You feel me? And I don't only seek out truth, but I want all my people to be truth seekers. You feel me? And I understand that everybody's not going to be a truth seeker. You know, some people are those who are meant to do other things. But you know what? That doesn't mean that I won't hope and wish. Because being a truth seeker is what we all need to do to seek out the truth of who we really are as a people. You feel me? And what your purpose is here. And so I am here. I am Black. And I am back here at the Black Village Community Podcast and Forum, here to drop nothing but the raw and uncut, as I always do. You feel me? So let me change my intro music from Brother J Bach and give you a little bit of more Brother J Bach in the backdrop on the loop. You feel me? So let me do this right quick so we can get this thing going today. So yeah, today's podcast topic, and I quote, if you haven't got a copy and haven't seen my podcast events page, is titled "The Black Moors, Are They Indigenous or Just Ambiguous Invaders from Africa?" Again, podcast topic this delicious Black Sunday is the Black Moors. Are they indigenous or just ambiguous invaders from Africa? Now, I raised that question, okay? And I raised that question for a reason. Okay, let me first explain why I am on this topic matter. Why am I discussing this? You know, JC, this is not about indigenous history. This is not about what's affecting us as Black people. This is about, why you dealing with, these brothers. And I want you to say, let me first give a lot of respect and let me give some respect where respect is due to brothers who are Moor, because the Moors have done a lot of positive things for the Black community. So let me first establish that. I have no personal qualms. I have no personal vendetta or no personal issues with the Moors. They have done a great deal of positivity in the Black community. But when it comes to talking about history, when it comes to talking about identity reclassification, and when it comes to ethnic and identity, this is where the line is drawn with me and Moors, okay? And so before I go into talking more about the Moors, I think I need to establish a few things first. Let me set the platform for this podcast, okay? I chose the word ambiguous for a reason. Again, the title of the podcast is "The Black Moors, Are They Indigenous or Just Ambiguous Invaders from Africa?" I chose that word ambiguous for a reason. The word ambiguous meaning, to give everybody who might be wondering, okay, what is the word ambiguous? That's not something you hear all the time. Not that anybody is stupid, because I know there's words I forget the definitions to, due to the fact that there are some words that you just don't hear people use in everyday language on a normality basis. So the meaning of the word ambiguous, if anybody is wondering what it means or want to grab their dictionaries to find out what it means to open to more than one interpretation, or having a double meaning. Okay? Again, the word ambiguous means to be open to more than one interpretation, or something that has, or a person, or a language, or a thing that has a double meaning. You feel me? Has a double interpretation. So that's why I chose the word ambiguous, because it appears to me that from my research so far, and I'm still learning, so I'm still learning about the Moors. Now, I've always known some African history about the Moors because, at one time years ago, I used to be into Pan-Africanism. So, when you're into Pan-Africanism, you want to study all the African history that you can get your hands on. And so I do know some, more history from the African perspective. And so this is what I'm going to go into. I think that if I'm going to talk about the Moors here in America, or the organization, or groups, or factions of the Moors, like you got the Nubian Moors, you got the Washita Moors, and so and there's other groups as well. I think that people need to understand the history. At least it was good for me to know the history and the floor mat and the foundation of where the concept, the word, the identity, or reclassification of those who are taking on that identity as Moors. Where did it come from? What does it mean? Does it mean the same thing today as it did yesterday? And so this is where it comes in, me talking about my purpose. The first thing I want to establish and analyze, just who are the Moors? Where did they originate and come from? Okay? Are they descendants of Africans? Or, are they descendants of indigenous Indians? Or are they descendants of Europeans? How and when did they begin? And how and when did they begin when it comes to them being in America? And why does it appear that Moors get so much respect from governments or authorities or political leaders? Why does it seem that they get respect from people? You feel me? Or specifically white people? So these are questions in my mind that I wanted answered, which led me on to my research and my study of the Moors. And so let me first start with saying this, okay? Moorish and American concept versus Black Americans and versus African Americans. And I pulled this from a website that I thought was very, I liked what this person was saying on the terminology of Moorish American versus Black American versus African American. So let me quote this. He says, "What people call themselves is a brand. It has been written throughout history that the Greeks, the Arabs, the Romans, the Spanish, the French, the German, the British had used a term such as Black Moor, Mavaro, or Morris, or Mori, or Maroons, or Moreno, or Morana, or Maurice, and others as general descriptions for the indigenous Africans. In the book, The Destruction of the Black Civilization by Dr. Chancellor Williams, he describes the Moors or the Moorish people as Black Africans from West Africa. The Ghana empires, Mali Empire, the Songhai empires, the Mansa Musa Empire of the Mali Empire was a Moor from 700 AD to 600 AD. Black West Africans in particular, and most of Africa as a whole were called Moors or Black Moors. And so that was something I wanted to bring out. And it was also used, the word Moor was used also to define someone's complexion, being black or swarthy. So I would concur to that. Be the fact that years ago when I was into Pan-Africanism and I was into my African studies, I kept seeing in history books the term Moor. So for some reason, historians, as well as I comprehend why Arabs did it, because a lot of Arabs took on the identity of being Moors, especially when they joined the North African Moors who were settled in Mauritania. And they joined, all the Arabs and Muslims joined together. They took on this identity called Moors because the word Moor only meant black. And you have a lot of Arabs that are black and some that look black and so forth. So that's comprehended. That makes sense to me. And that's why I wanted to read that. I thought that made sense because that excerpt right there that I took, that made sense. Why are historians, and why have historians from the early 1900s and onward, even into ancient times? Why? I can't say ancient times, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because the country in North Africa, which was once called Mauritania. So let me read that as well. Okay, and also let me read the definition of the online dictionary of when it comes to the term Moor. Okay, the online dictionary terminology of Moor says a member of northwestern Africa, Muslims of mixed Berber Arab descent. In the 8th century, they conquered the Iberian Peninsula, but were finally driven out of their last stronghold in Granada, a city in southern Spain, at the end of the 15th century. Now, the Webster's Online Dictionary, 1828 edition, it says Moor, a native of northern coast of Africa called by the Romans from the color of the people of Mauritania, the country of dark complexed people. The same country is now called Morocco. The second definition of the Webster Dictionary Online 1828, to confine or to secure a ship in a particular station by cables and anchors by chains. A ship is never said to be moved when she rides by a single anchor. The third definition, to be confined by cables or chains. Okay, these are the definitions of the word Moor. Okay, I've also read somewhere where it said the word Moor is also a connotation or definition, which is linked to, like it says, anchors on a ship and an oar. So that means that the Moor people also traveled on the water, and that's definitely true. When you research the information, the Moors gave a lot of technology, a lot of they preserved the history when they conquered the Europeans, which they conquered Europe in the 7th century. And then when they conquered Europe in the 7th century, they conquered Europe for almost 800 years. And so when I read about how the Moors conquered Europe for almost 800 years, how they preserved history, how they preserved culture. They didn't destroy the European culture. They didn't destroy Europeans, but they ruled over the Europeans for over 800 years. But they also brought a lot of things to Europeans that Europeans were not accustomed to. One of the things was cleanliness. Another thing was math and mathematics and literacy. And so there was a lot of things. So I personally think, before I go into the connection, don't get me twisted, folks, I'm not getting lost. This is going to be a 2-part or 3-part series, because I want to set the foundation that Moors are Africans. Now, how that link crossed over here into North America, that's going to be a little bit to detangle, and that's the reason why I believe it's really important for me to set the floor mat, to set the foundation of what I'm doing, is to establish that Moors are Africans. In particular, they're not only Africans, but they're African Muslims. And that does not kind of vibe with me as an indigenous Aboriginal brother. But at the same time, I am a person, I am a man, I am an indigenous Aboriginal black man of truth. And so that's what I seek out. You feel me? If I found out that Moors, that black Moors were indigenous to North America, then I would just flat out accept that and say so. But so far, from my research, those connections don't add up. So I'm going to set that path. I'm going to show that through the research that I have done. So before we go any further, I got an audio cast I want to play that's going to speak to the information that I'm talking about right now. Why do the white men why do Europeans respect Moors? You know, so much. What's going on with that? The white men don't respect anybody with dark complexion. You know, not really. You know, he respects money, he respects wealth, but he doesn't respect your complexion, because he's not that complexion, and he understands what melanin is. Melanin is more than just a color, and the white man knows this because he's researched it. So why does he respect the Moors so much? And I want to know this. So that required me to go and look into the history of the Moors in Africa and their history. And so I'm gonna play this audio cast, and we shall return right after this and conclude our discussion on the black Moors. Are they indigenous, or are they just ambiguous invaders from Africa? And you can join me here today on this delicious Black Sunday the Black Village Community Podcast. It doesn't cost you a dime just to bring your conscious time. You can chime in at 855-445-9340. You can also chime in at 857-232-0155. And don't forget the conference key to get through the conference door to sit here at the conscious table of truth with me, JC, aka Afro Black, your storm of consciousness, 947595. We shall return right after this audio cast and conclude our podcast topic this delicious Black Sunday. And I'm JC aka Afro Black, your storm of consciousness, here on the Black Village Community Podcast.
You know, it's kind of like what your boy Stevie said. 1492, you came up on these shores 700 years, educated by the Moors. What up, y'all? It's your boy Home Team here. I'm back at it with another video of African history, culture, and worldview. Today, I want to talk about one of the greatest days in African history. Now, we all have a tendency to view the Moors as some sort of continuous dynastic rule that spanned the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. But the Moorish Empire had different factions and periods that are layered in complexity. In fact, I personally wouldn't call it the Moorish Empire because they were separated and ruled by different caliphates with differing religious affiliations within Islam itself. They sometimes didn't even get along with each other. That's why you had different caliphates and Moorish states that actually attacked each other. Now, when talking about the ethnic persuasion of the Moors, people get into heated debates. Some say the Moors were black, some say they were Arabs, but the overwhelming truth is, it really depends on which caliphate you're talking about. Now, the caliphate in the east was a mixture of Arabs and black African Muslims, and even half Arab and half black Muslims. There were also many Berbers that were involved as well, the Berbers being mixed themselves. But the caliphates in the west, the ones responsible for the conquest of Spain for over 500 plus years, was overwhelmingly black African, consisting of Africans from the north and the west. Now, Europeans made it very clear what they meant by Moor. Yes, they were aware of non-black African Moors. But when they got in a battle with Moors, apparently all they saw was a sea of black faces. When the Spanish king Alfonso V spoke of the Moorish conquest of Spain, he said, and I quote, "All the Moorish soldiers were dressed in silk and black wool that had been forcibly acquired. Their black faces were like pitch, and the most handsome of them was as black as a cooking pan." Now, we can clearly see that black Africans made a lasting impression on these Europeans because they immediately associate the Moors with black. Let's just use some common sense here. The closest people to Spain in general are Africans. So it would only make sense that the Moors contingent would consist of black Africans, at least a majority black. Now, the initial conquest of Spain was a combination of Arab and black Muslims, some scholars believing it was mostly black due to the recruitment of Africans in the interior. Now, after the initial conquest, it just went all downhill from there for Spain because it got blacker and blacker and blacker. The invasion pretty much started like this. There was a nobleman named Julian who sent his daughter to King Rhetoric to be educated, and your boy Roderick ended up raping her. Julian, of course, upset by this, wanted to get revenge. So he goes to Africa and he literally tells the Africans that Spain is weak, and if he wanted to conquer it, it would be easy work. So the Moors were just like, oh, word? And just like Julian said, the Moors went up into Spain and conquered it relatively easy.
Okay, there you go right there. This brother Home Team, I like using his his little history shorts that he be doing because he be on button. You feel me? The brother be on button. And I like the way he talks. So I know I could easily just did that myself and read that myself, but I like the way he formatted his show and how he talks about African history. And I also want to establish the fact, I don't want people thinking that, as an indigenous aborigine, that I have a problem with Africans. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. I love Africa. I love African people. I love African art. I love African history. I love African culture. But I am not an African. You know, you got white people who love Africa, love African culture, love African food, love African traditions, but they white, but they not African. You got people who love Chinese culture, but they not Chinese. I am an aborigine, indigenous to North America. You feel me? But I still love of Africa. You know, I have a love for Africa, and Africa obviously had a love for our people, because there is a deep-seated connection that we do have with the people of Africa, from the perspective that those who came over here stayed and never went back. But that don't mean that we're African. North American Aboriginal people have their own culture. So let me focus back onto my main podcast topic, talking about the history of the Moors. And you heard the brother, he mentioned that the Moors were Africans. He mentioned that the Moors were Africans. He mentioned that the Moors were a people that made up different Arab groups, because Islam obviously took control of that region called Mauritania, which is today called Morocco, back in the 7th and the 6th, between the 6th and the 7th century AD. They conquered Mauritania. I researched this. Matter of fact, I got some of that information right here. Let me read that right quick about Mauritania. Okay, this is an excerpt from a historical text. It says, let me go into that. Let me turn down my little bit right here as I read this. Mauritania, an ancient geographical area of northwest coast of Africa, including the modern Morocco, parts of Algeria. It was bounded by the Mediterranean, North Mediterranean to the east of Mediterranean, by the river, by a river called Abasaga, which separated it from Numidia, south by the Atlantic Mountains, and west by the Atlantic, by the Atlas Mountains, and by west by the Atlantic. Numerous rivers intersect this mountainous region, and the empty either in the Atlantic or the Mediterranean. Okay, I want to jump down. The Phoenicians, at a remote age, founded so many settlements there, and along the whole coast, where there was not a single town whose population was not of Canaanite race. Okay, Herodotus does not mention the nation of this region. Later writers say that from the earliest times it was inhabited by Maurices or Moires or Moors, black tribes probably of the same race of the Numidians. But their accounts of the origins or immigration of these people seem to be scarce or obscure. The people have, by recent research, have been connected to the Libyans of the Egyptian monuments. Okay, they first became known by the Romans when later in history, with the Carthaginians had carried the war into Africa. Okay, and then it goes a little bit down further. Let me jump down here. It also says, confirmed as joint kings of the country by Julius Caesar in 49 BC. In AD 42, the Romans divided the kingdom into provinces separated from each by the river Mula or Molucca. The western province was called Mauritania, and the eastern Mauritania. The Romans founded these provinces and considered colonies, and introduced into the population a larger element of the Italian origin. Okay, let me go down a little bit further and check out. Then it says right here, then the Muslims comes in. And 429, the Vandals and the Germanic people conquered Mauritania. In 533, it was conquered by the Balearians and it remained in province of the empire till overran and subdued by Mohammedan Arabs about close to the 7th century. Now, again, these were a black people, obviously being conquered by a number of other ethnic groups. They were conquered by not only by the Romans, but they were also conquered by the Vandals, and they were conquered by another white group. And then later on, they were by the 7th century, they were conquered by Arabs. Then Arabs came in and took over. And when the Arabs came in and took over, that's when they became black Moors. That's when the name, the concept, and the ideology and the identity classification of a Moor became synonymous and connected with Islam. And so, I'm not saying that was purposely done. I don't know why that was done, because the word Moor does not mean Arab. But for some reason, all the Moors that I've come in contact with, all the Moors I've read about, after Mohammedan conquest of Mauritania, becoming Morocco, from thenceforth, all Moors were Muslims. And so, let me continue a second part to this history lesson on the black Moors. Are they indigenous or just ambiguous invaders from Africa? So I'm going to conclude this other audio cast on the history of the African Moors, and I will return after this.
The invasion pretty much started like this. There was a nobleman named Julian who sent his daughter to King RHETORIC to be educated, and your boy RHETORIC ended up raping her. Julian, of course, upset by this, wanted to get revenge. So he goes to Africa and he literally tells the Africans that Spain is weak, and if he wanted to conquer it, it would be easy work. So the Moors were just like, oh, word? And just like Julian said, the Moors went up into Spain and conquered it relatively easy. So because your daughter got raped, you're willing to allow millions of people to die and let a whole nation of people get conquered and dominated for 500 years? Yeah, anyway, after the Moors dominated Spain, of course the Spanish tried to fight back. And Alfonso had some success against the Moors in Spain, even pushing the Moors back further south. But then the Moors asked for help from the Almoravids. Now, if the Moors weren't black enough for you, here's where it gets really black. Now, the Almoravid dynasty originated in West Africa and the Senegal region. You don't really get much blacker than Senegal. Now, the Almoravid Empire was pretty much split up into two major sections. The Southern Confederacy was ruled by Abu Bakr in the south, and the northern part was ruled by his cousin, Yusuf ibn Tashfin. Now, Yusuf was described as being brown-skinned with woolly hair, and he was even the founder of the Moroccan city of Marrakesh. Yusuf went up into Spain with his army of Africans and had a very special cavalry unit that was specifically from Senegal. Apparently they were a beast. His army even used drums to intimidate the enemy. He went up into Spain and defeated Alfonso VI in the Battle of Zaleka. Now get this, Zaleka literally means slippery ground, because the warriors were slipping all over the place because of the amount of bloodshed that was spilled that day. Wow. Yusuf checked the Spanish advance and solidified Moorish rule in the area. Now, the Almoravids seemed to be very conservative when it came to Islam. So while Yusuf was in Spain, he saw that the Moors there were pretty relaxed and just kind of chilling. So he was just like, I'm going to have to reconquer this place. And he did. And that's pretty much how the Almoravid dynasty started. He was considered the caliph, or the ruler of the entire western section of the Moorish Empire. Now, when we look at Moorish Spain, we only tend to see pictures of black men that ruled in that area and who were involved in day-to-day activities and Moorish Spanish life. Now, Yusuf definitely relied heavily on black Africans from the interior to make up his army, and apparently he was aware of this imbalance. So he brought in a vast number of black females to use as domestics and even concubines. I guess he really liked the home team. The situation in Spain was the complete opposite of how it was in the New World concerning slavery. In fact, most indigenous Europeans were either slaves or serfs. Now, after some time, the Almoravids began to chill a little bit, and they even aligned with other Christian groups. And that's when the Almohads began to take over. In my opinion, the greatest Moorish leader came from the Almohads. His name was Yaqub al-Mansur. His name literally means the invincible, because he defeated all his enemies and never lost a battle. Now, his mother was a black African from Senegal, or Mali, and his father was half black and half Arab. So that makes him just as black as any African American walking the streets of DC today. Yeah. Now, Mansour came to the throne after his father was killed in Portugal. That was the worst thing the Portuguese could have ever done, because Mansour swore revenge. Mansour returned to Portugal and devastated Portuguese cities and even destroyed Spanish cities as well. He then proceeded to take 3,000 captives back to Africa, most of them women and children. Now, while Mansour was in Africa, the Spanish got brave and decided to attack the Moors again, this time with the help of crusaders from England. So Mansour returned to Spain, defeated the European coalition, chained up the Spanish with their allies, and sold them into slavery in Africa. Talk about paradigm shift. Now Mansour returned to Africa and the Christians got excited and they attacked the Moors again. This European coalition was the largest Christian army ever assembled between the Moorish and Spanish interaction. He really needs to stop going back to Africa. Mansour devastatingly defeats the Spanish and their allies and strips them of many valuables and goods. So after that, the Spanish pretty much chilled out for several years. Now it's said that the only reason Mansour didn't continue his campaign was because he actually lost interest in Spain. And on top of that, he became very ill. Now scholars are convinced that the Moors took Europeans out of the Dark Ages. At this time, most of Europe was illiterate, and it was even considered a sin to take a bath. Not only did the Moors bring architecture, science, and knowledge into Spain, but they built large baths all over Spain. In fact, Mansour is known for his therapeutic hot springs. The legacy of the Moors is epic and endless. Even today, you'll find countless images of Africans in Spain representing the Moors' conquest. The only reason why Christopher Columbus was able to sail to the New World is because Spain just acquired their freedom from the Moors in 1492. You're probably not going to find that in public school history books. But y'all know what's up. It's your boy Home Team. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.
Okay, that's brother Home Team. He be dropping the wrong cut, on African history. You know what? Let me say this, okay? Listening to the knowledge, listening to the conquest and the rule of the Moors and how long they ruled over Europe, totally comprehensible why they would respect the Moors. Well, the Moors did not destroy their culture or their civilization, did not destroy and prevent them from being a people. Just ruled over them and actually left them with something they didn't have. How to wash their ass, how to advance knowledge of mathematics, preserve their history, didn't destroy their books, didn't destroy their history, preserved it for them, even gave them history they didn't have and didn't know of because the Catholic Church had destroyed a number of documentation. So I give it up to the Moors on that level. But when it comes to connecting them to North America, this is where I have an issue. And you know what? I got a wonderful brother who I really like and really care about. So it's a distant, long distance internet relationship, but the brother's a part of my forum on the Black Village, and I got nothing but respect for the brother. And he's sharing some information with me right now. Now he's telling me that, and I know that there was a Moor on the ship. There was a number of Moors, matter of fact, on the ship with Columbus as he traveled and explored, and that he's bringing to my attention that the Moor that was on the ship was saying that the people that Columbus was bumping into, the indigenous people, he called them Moors. But see, the word Moor only means black. Islam took the title or the concept, the identity of Moor to another level. Islam did. Before that, when the Romans had conquered Mauritania between 49 BC, when Julius Caesar came into contact with that little region, which used to be Carthage, and then around 42 AD, the Romans had ruled over Mauritania, and the Romans, through their Greek dialect, they called the people Moors, and the word Moor means black or swarthy. But by the time the Muslims, between 6 and 7 AD, when the Muslims came in and conquered that region of North Africa and retitled Mauritania Morocco and the caliph that ruled over it, and you heard the brother talk about that history as I played that recap, that audio cast, a new identity, in my opinion, emerged. And that identity was merging together that identity classification of Moor, and they merged it with Islam. Now, not all Muslims are Moors, because not all Muslims are from Africa. You know, matter of fact, I mean, I don't want to go into my thoughts and my opinions on Islam, because that's a personal thing. But just from an educated position, from an educated standpoint, Arabs have never considered themselves Africans. So, how caliphs who were Arabs were called Moors? Well, that means they had to have been born within that city or that area of Mauritania, obviously. And so they fell up under the title of Moor, because Moor became connected to the country or city of Mauritania. Well, today, that region is Morocco. There is no Mauritania there anymore. So, you know, so this is where I can't see why somebody would say, okay, because I ran into some islands which led the Spanish, obviously, because Columbus never discovered North America. Again, Columbus never discovered North America. He only discovered some islands which led the Spanish to North America. But just because there is obviously a Muslim Moor, because look, the Moors ruled over Spain for over 800 years, or about 800 years. The Moors learned the Spanish culture and brought culture to Spain as well. But in the process, those Spanish Moors were still Moors. Now, when you go into the history of how the Catholic Church continued to fight along with Europeans to push the Moors out of European countries as well as Spain, then you can comprehend the fact that you had Moors who had to make a decision. If they, not only they had to leave Spain, but they wasn't finna let go of Islam. You feel me? Because you got to realize, during this 500, 600, 7 year conquest over Spaniard people and parts of Europe, the European peoples, there was a religious influence as well. Now, we don't hear the Muslims or the Moorish Muslims forcing the Europeans to become Muslims. We don't see that. We don't hear that written in history. But when you look at what they did to Africa, they didn't give them a choice. They forced the Africans to become Muslims. The Moors did. I'm not talking about Muslims. I'm still talking about the African Moors. They forced the Africans to become Muslim. They didn't have a choice. But the Europeans didn't get treated like that. Europeans wasn't forced and weren't killed by the sword to make a choice to become Muslim or become a Christian or whatever they want to be. They didn't do them like that. They treated them with more respect for some reason. You feel me? And the brother talking about the one Moorish caliph who brought sisters, well, he did that because all the other Moors were worshiping white women. When you do history on the Moorish people and their activities and their relationships and what was going on, you see that the Moorish Muslims loved white women. So, there was obviously cultural distinctions going on. You feel me? Cultural distinctions. And what I mean by cultural distinctions, you had the African Moors who still held on to a lot of their African culture, including their dedication to their women. And then you had the Arab Moors, who obviously didn't see a cultural difference when it came to relationship with women. You feel me? They married white women, and that's why you got more and more Arabs looking more lighter and whiter over the years, and so forth. But that's a whole nother area. But coming back to this and looking at this from a perspective of connecting it to over here in North America, I don't see the connection. Now, I'm still doing research. I will say that much. And I am man enough to come back on my podcast and make any corrections where I fall short. I've made statements that was incorrect, to go back and say, hey, you guys, I was wrong on this or I was wrong on that. But so far, I don't see a connection where Islam was over here prior to European colonization. Matter of fact, the Africans, or the West Africans who traveled over here, specifically the Olmecs, were not Muslim. The Olmecs did not practice Islam. And let's not talk about other African travels back during the time of between 8,000 to 15,000 years ago who came over here. They were not Muslim. Islam did not come into existence until around between 525 to 600 AD. Raw and uncut like that. If there's a history that's older than that, I haven't seen it. And I've even challenged other Muslims to show it to me. You feel me? So, on that note, matter of fact, talking about on that note, let me point out something that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to because of the mindset of Western ideology that forces a lot of people and fosters a lot of people to see things through a narrow perspective. Let me play this right quick. And I mean, I think this is important. This brother who was just the audio cast talking about the Moors, the audio cast I just played, this is him talking about culture. And I totally 100% agree with what this brother's saying. Check this out.
For example, in Western Africa alone, there are thousands of different ethnic groups who speak a different language, have different cultures, and have completely different worldviews and religions. So why in the world would they view each other as the same when they don't even speak the same language? You know, I find it interesting that people are willing to accept the differences between Europeans and Asians, but when it comes to Africans, they all of a sudden want to paint one broad stroke and completely ignore the diversity.
Yeah, I just had to play that. I mean, because when it comes to us over here in North America, because the white man has played checkerboard. Let me cut off everybody's mic right quick. Because the white man has played for over 300 years, between 300 to 500 years, the white man had the opportunity to play with the indigenous people like checkerboards on a chessboard, or chess pieces on a chessboard, or checker pieces on a checkerboard, moving around, manipulating their culture, stealing their culture, reclassifying us, wiping our culture and our language and our history from our minds through chattel slavery. As a result of that, it allowed other groups to come in over here from Africa, from Asia, from other countries, and manipulate us as a people. When you take a computer and you wipe the hard drive, you can put whatever you want on it after you wipe the hard drive, and that's what has happened to us over here. And you know what? The Moors and look, brothers, don't take this personal. I don't have any problem with the Moors because we live in America, which is a free country. You can worship, do whatever you want to do as long as you don't hurt nobody. So this is not personal. This is about education. This is an education issue with me. This is a reclassification issue with me. You feel me? The Moors are no different than any other group when it comes to the perspective of trying to take our identity, reclassify us, somebody else, and then bring us into their group. Cultural genocide. Cultural genocide, people. Well, now you're not Cherokee. You don't practice Cherokee ways. You don't speak Cherokee language. You don't practice Cherokee customs. No, you know what you don't know? No, you're a black Moor. You're a Muslim. You're supposed to be worshiping Allah. You're supposed to be taking Shahada. You're supposed to be doing Ramadan. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what your original. No, I don't think so. This is no disrespect to Muslims. If you're a Muslim, more power to you. If you're a Christian, more power to you. But it's wrong for us to be dictating to one another about who one another is. I look, if a brother come to me and ask me something, I will tell that brother from my perspective, the raw and uncut. But if that brother tells me, well, brother, I don't agree with you. Okay, well, wonderful. That's just my perspective. I'm not going to get mad at him because he don't agree with me. This is what I don't comprehend about brothers who are Muslim, brothers who are Moors, brothers who are Christians, brothers who are Hebrew Israelites. These brothers bring their religious perspective to the table and they're ready to fight about it because nobody don't agree with them. Exactly, my brother. Religion is supposed to be a personal thing. But see, how can it be personal when it's been merged with identity? to the degree that it's reclassifying. I could never be a Moor. Number one, I'm not a Muslim. Number two, my people did not call themselves Moors. They didn't call themselves black either. They didn't call themselves African. They didn't call themselves African American. The Cherokee were called Cherokee. When I did research on the Wichita, I'm talking about the original Wichita. The original Wichita people, yes, who was in the Louisiana area, right there in the area near the Wichita River. Those indigenous people did not call themselves Moors. They called themselves WASHITAW. They called themselves WASHITAW. They spoke a Washita language. They're tied to the Natchez people. They're tied to the Caddo people. They're tied to they had a confederacy with the Caddo. But you know what? This gets tied up in a lot of political and religious rhetoric because people want to tie their religion to their culture. Black people are the most enslaved, clone, puppet, walking, talking, whatever somebody tells them to say instead of looking for themselves. Instead of researching for themselves. So, yeah, you know, my problem with the Moors is only from the fact, I mean, there was a brother just the past few days on Google was coming on my events page, a Moor brother, and was just saying, "You're a Moor." That's all he would say. "You're a Moor." He kept telling me, "You're a Moor." I had to tell the brother, I said, "Look, brother, you a Moor. Don't tell me who I am. You a Moor. You from Africa. I'm not from Africa. I'm from North America, brother. My grandma is Cherokee, Choctaw, and Blackfoot. I'm sorry, man. I'm not a Moor, bruh." And I asked the brother, why are you doing what the white man do? I told him, I said, why are you doing what the white devil do? And he can't deny it. He couldn't deny it. Why are you you telling me who I am? I said, I'm not telling you who you are. I'm not telling you you're not a Moor. Why you gonna tell me who I am? Why you gonna do what the white man do? I told bro, this is not slavery no more, man. Slavery's days is over. Physical bondage is over, bro. Told the brother, man, you don't tell me. You don't come on my podcast events page and tell me who I am. I'm not telling you who you are. That's why I say religion is an issue. Religion is an issue. It doesn't matter if doesn't matter what sect of religion it is. Doesn't matter what sect of religion. Doesn't matter if it's Christianity, Judaism, Hebrewism, Islam. It doesn't matter. A lot of the people, not everybody in these religions, but a great deal of the people in the religions, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it's like they so strongly into converting people that's the only thing that matters to them is converting people, and their way of converting people is, I guess, just, I don't know, harassing. It appears to me harassing people. They don't care about sitting down at the table and having a discussion because they don't want to discuss anything. If you don't think like them, they don't even want to talk about it. So they just, the game don't make sense to me, people. The game don't make sense. I'm gonna open up my conference room. If anybody got anything they want to contribute to the conscious table and bring the conference room is open. I see my sis there. I see my brother Hamid is still sitting here talking with brother. Okay, he says people who call themselves Moors are trying to create a culture because being a Moor is not a religion, that's a culture. Okay, but yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, I question it even being a culture. I question it even being a culture because the first time in written history that the term and the label and the word was used, Moor, it came out of the mouth of a Roman. The people of Mauritania did not. I have not read anywhere. I have not, brother Hamid, brother. I'm gonna say it. I have not heard anywhere where the people of the country of Mauritania during 49 BC, during the ancient times, calling themselves Moors. It says the first time that the word was used, matter of fact, I got the information right here. Let me pull it up. First time the word was used, it was the Romans who called the people Moors because of the name of the city called Mauritania, and they're the ones who separated it into provinces. It was right here. It says the Romans founded these provinces, 21 considerable colonies, introduced into the population large elements of Italian origins, and it talks about the Romans divided the kingdoms into two provinces, separated And so, yeah, the Romans called the people Moors, and according to the Greek dialect, the word Moor meant black or swarthy. So, it appears to me that the use of the term Moor became very prominent, became something that was a normality to use when the Muslims took over Mauritania and renamed the place Morocco. Okay, so the people are trying to make, they want to make it a culture. But see, when you say make it a culture, brother, then you have to explain something to me, because the only culture I see amongst Moors is Islam. Islam has become a culture. Now, Islam has become a culture, and I don't even want to say it's hard to say that it's become, because it appears that it is a culture, a religion that's wrapped up in a culture, because Islam affects everything in your life, from what you eat to how you sleep, to your marriage, to your children, to your everyday life. And so when something affects your everyday life, it becomes a culture, because it's something that you live. So the Moors, and throughout history, like I say, when you read history, you cannot separate Islam from Moors. You can't separate it. And I say that because throughout history, these people who were called Moors, who were from Northwest Africa and from that region, that was originally Mauritania, that became Morocco, those people that emerged were Muslims, and they didn't emerge as a people until between the 6th and the 7th century AD. And when they came out conquering. So they came out conquering. So to call Moors a culture, I can't agree with that. I would say that it's more of an identity reclassification, because you can become a Muslim and you don't even have to call yourself a Moor. But if you are a Moor and you call yourself a Muslim, then you're claiming an identity from Northwest Africa. So from that perspective, mixed with Islam, yes, it becomes a culture. Then yes, I can agree with that. So now let me go. Anybody got any questions about what's being spoke about? I do got something I want to play, because I'm gonna tell you something. A connection that the Nubian Moors and the Wichita Moors here in North America, they lay claim to by when they talk about saying Africans were here. That Moors were here before European colonization. There's only one documented case of a Moor actually being over here in North America, which this Moor was over here. Let me see, what year was that? There's only one documented case. It was the exploration of Cabaza de Vaca, his travels, the travels and explorations of explorer Cabaza de Vaca. This was during the 1528 to 1536. Okay, it says after the period of recovery of Cabaza de Vaca and others traveled to Guadalajara, and from there to Mexico City. Many officials recognized Cabo de Vaca, his experiences, and made him extremely valuable. I'm getting confused. I don't want to get nobody confused. Cabaza de Vaca was an Spanish explorer. He was a Spanish explorer who traveled to North America between 1528 and 1536. So instead of me reading this, let me just cut down to the chase. Okay, his exploration started out with 600 men, soldiers, as well as 600 men. Well, his exploration ended up in a disaster, and by the time it got done with, he was 7 years later. By the time he got back to Spain, it was only 4 of them. So his men got decimated. His men got destroyed. They died from disease. They died from war, fighting with the indigenous people over here. The indigenous people kicked their behind and killed them. And so his 600 men was decimated and killed. But only 4 survivors. And Cabo de Vaca was one of the survivors. You see, the other survivors consisted of, because one of the survivors was a Moor by the name of Estabinco. So, so Now, and I've heard Black Moors mention about this man being, you know, he was an interpreter. He traveled with Cabaza de Vaca, and he also ended up stuck over here in North America for a number of years before he made it back to Spain as well, and he survived. Okay, but when it comes to talking about him, he spent time over here. He was stuck over here, starvation. Because he spoke more than one language, he was able to eventually learn to translate some of the language of the indigenous people and to learn to speak their language. And eventually, several years later, along with Cabaza de Vaca, they made it back to Spain. Okay, near death. They almost died too. So almost all 600 of them died, but 4 survived. And this brother, Estebanico, was one of them, and he was a Spanish Black Moor who survived. Now later on, he dies. He comes on another expedition. He comes on another expedition, and he gets killed. He gets killed by the indigenous native peoples. That doesn't verify Moors being over here, that story. Matter of fact, you know what? Let me play that audio cast. There's an audio cast that I want to play in reference to that, because a woman wrote a book about this man, a Moroccan. She wrote a book about this Moor who traveled over here in 1528. And but she doesn't mention about what happened to him, and she doesn't go into too much detail, but she does go into a little bit detail about, it's called he was a survivor who traveled over here in 1528. So let me play this and we shall return.
Here's a bit of American history you might not be familiar with. In the spring of 1528, 600 Spanish and Portuguese men, mostly soldiers, landed on the Gulf Coast of Florida, hoping to find gold. But the Narvaez expedition was an utter disaster. Within a year, nearly all of the men had either deserted or succumbed to disease, starvation, drowning, or violent death in fights with indigenous people. The 4 survivors made their way across the continent, living with the natives, until they finally reached the Spanish settlements on the western coast of Mexico. That disastrous expedition is the inspiration for a new novel by the Moroccan-American writer Leila Lalami. It's told from the perspective of the expedition's most mysterious survivor, a Moroccan slave. It's called The Moor's Account. I asked Leila how we even know about all of this today.
One of the survivors was the treasurer of this expedition, and his name is Cabeza de Vaca, and he wrote what is the first travelogue of life in North America, and really the first narrative of Spanish exploration of North America. And I just became so fascinated with this expedition, and with everything that went wrong with it, and with the greed that drove it, and the transformations that it led to, that I just wanted to know more. And the narrative that Cabeza de Vaca provided just didn't give me the answers that I was looking for. And so that's how the novel came about.
And so that this character, the Moor in the title, we know that he existed historically.
Yeah.
Do we know much about him historically?
Not really. So when I started reading Cabeza de Vaca's travelogue, I started paying very close attention to when this Moroccan slave was appearing, because I'm Moroccan. I was very interested in him. And there were very, very few mentions of him. So he was either identified as the slave or the Negro or Estebanico. Those were the 3 ways in which he was identified in the book. And all we know about him historically is that he was born in Azamor and that he was an Arabic-speaking Black man. That's literally the one line of biography that we have about him from Cabeza de Vaca. I just became so fascinated by him because to me he seemed like a thoroughly modern man. Because even though he came from Morocco in 1520, like to me he seemed like the first globalized man. Like he was born in Morocco. Likely, even though he spoke Arabic, he was from Azamor. So likely he also spoke Tamazight, which is the language of the indigenous people of that area. In Azamor, Azamor was under vassalage with the Portuguese. So he probably spoke some Portuguese. And then he moved to Spain as a slave and from there moved to America with the expedition. So he just lived in these 3 continents. He interacted with all these different cultures. He spoke all these different languages. So to me, he struck me as a very global man, cosmopolitan man.
There you go. I just had to play that because I've read where these Moors are trying their best to connect black folks to Africa, and that's my issue. Okay, because they're saying culture don't matter in so many words, and that's the thing. You cannot omit culture. Culture itself. Culture is in itself is an identity connection. You feel me? Culture connects Chinese people to their culture. It connects Italians to their culture. Mexicans who were not, and you gotta remember, Mexicans have not always been here. Mexico was created. When I say created, I know that the capital of Mexico, which the name itself is ancient, which is tied to the capital city of the Aztec Empire, but the people themselves, the culture itself, became a combination of Spanish and indigenous works, indigenous peoples. It became the indigenous people and the Spanish people came together and created a culture. You feel me? And so, doing it, yes sir. You go ahead, my brother. You got something you want to go ahead, young man?
Yeah, I was gonna say that when I took Latin history in college, when the Spaniards first took over what's now called Mexico, they used to call it New Spain before they called it Mexico.
Exactly. And that right there in itself, just that right there, what you just pointed out, shows how strong the Spanish culture and the indigenous culture eventually became one, which you see today, because the people in Mexico speak Spanish. They're not speaking the indigenous language of the indigenous people, and the indigenous a lot of the indigenous people of Mexico are still right there in Pueblo is one of the places where a deep root of indigenous Indian culture is right there in Pueblo. You feel me? So due to the fact that the country's predominant language is still Spanish, lets you know that the Spanish had a strong foothold as far as influence in the culture, influencing their culture on another culture, which is called cultural genocide. But it did not kill off the indigenous culture because they're still there. My point is that Moors are doing the same thing. Moors are trying to impose an African identity, an African culture on the indigenous people of North America, and that's wrong. Because the indigenous people of North America had their own culture, their own identity. And when you, I don't want to go too much into this because my show is actually over, but I want to say this much, okay? And I'm going to do a part 2 to this because today's podcast was really about talking about the root and the true identity of the Moor people. The Moor people, the term itself is tied to Mauritania. Mauritania was where? In North Africa. Mauritania was a city in North Africa. And Mauritania today is Morocco. Because why? Because between the 6th and 7th century AD, Muslims took control of that place and renamed it Morocco. And so ever since then it's been Muslim and it's been Islamic. So every conquering Moor that's come out of Morocco from the 6th to 7th century to the present date has been African Muslims or Arab Muslims. And so what's going on over here in this country here, when it talks about the foundation and talk about the authorship of the WASHITAW Moors, the Nubian Moors, and so forth, which I'm going to do in my second podcast, and you will see I'm going to prove that they've tried to bring an African identity over here to reclassify us, as well as what the same thing as what the white men, no different than what the white man has done, and in the process they've tried to bring us into the family of Africa, and we're not Africans, people. You can't do that to. Why they trying to always? I don't understand it. Why black folks in America, everybody trying to change us and pull us somewhere instead of putting us right here where we belong on our homeland, where our people and our indigenous Aboriginal people are right here in North America. They want to pull us to Africa. They want to pull us to Israel. Hebrew Israelites want to pull us to Israel. You feel me? I respect my African people. I love African people. And I don't take away from the fact that we have a connection with the African people, but culturally, we're not African. Ethnically, we're not African. We're indigenous to North America. Our culture is indigenous to North America. Our people are indigenous to North America. The Africans that came over here didn't go back. Because if that was the case, there would have been a serious trade route and a serious connection with indigenous people and African indigenous people. But there's not. There's a sporadic disconnection. And the reason why is because a lot of those brothers who crossed over here, they did not go back. And those who did, a lot of them didn't. And if they made it back, they didn't come back because the waters were too treacherous and too dangerous. And that's why those who came stayed and they got absorbed by the indigenous Aboriginal populace. That's why you don't hear Cherokee talking about African stories. That's why you don't hear Choctaw, Chickasaw. That's why you don't hear them talking about African stories. That's why you don't hear any, even if you go do research on the indigenous Washitaw people, you don't hear them talking about no African stories. You don't hear the Seminoles talking about, no, you don't. Because the indigenous populace over here was too great, too strong, and had their own culture. They took what they needed, and the rest just passed on and kept going. So that's the Raw and Uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast, and I will be back. I will definitely be black. And you know, black is nothing but an adjective, so I will be black and Aboriginal and indigenous. You feel me? And so I appreciate my listeners. I appreciate my brother here chatting with me. I want you to know, brother, it's not easy to chat and try to type at the same time. So I appreciate my nephew and anybody and all my listeners who listen to the Black Village Community Podcast. But I will definitely be back. I will definitely be black, dropping nothing but the Raw and Uncut. I would definitely plan on doing a part two to this podcast topic, which is the Black Moors. Are they indigenous or just ambiguous invaders from Africa? And due to my research, it appears to me that they're just ambiguous leaders or ambiguous rulers or ambiguous Africans, who want to, and there's a group of people that wants to make a connection, wants us to be connected. And, even the sovereignty part of it, I'm going to get into that next week, the connection about the sovereignty part, Moors claiming their sovereignty through Morocco and all the connection in the 1740 treaty. And I'm going to get into all that. I'm going to talk about that next week. Today's podcast topic on the Black Moors, are they indigenous or just ambiguous invaders from Africa, was just to lay the framework that these brothers, their root is from North Africa. Their classification is from North Africa, and their connection is through Islam as well. You can't separate Islam from Moorish identity. The reason why is because between the 6th and 7th century AD, Muslims went in there, took control of Mauritania, renamed it Morocco, and they kept the classification of Moors along with it. So you cannot disconnect the two. No matter if a person want to say one don't mean the other, doesn't matter, because the Muslims merged it, so it's connected. So on that note, I would definitely be back, and I would definitely be black, dropping nothing but the Raw and Uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast. You can always chime in and join me. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a bit of your conscious time. You can chime in at 855-445-9340. You can also chime in at 857-232-0155, and don't forget the conference key to get through the conference door, 947595. I will definitely be back at 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time to 4 West Coast time here. So I will be back. Please join me, JC aka Afro Black, as I deal with the Raw and Uncut issues that affect us, black people, here in North America. You feel me? The indigenous Aboriginal people of North America. So I gotta go. Nephew, you got any last words you want to give before we go? Hey, my brother say, hey, thank you, my brother. And my queen wasn't here with me today because, she was real tired. She had a long day at work, and so she needed to rest. I'm pretty sure she's gonna be back next week. My queen got some words she want to say in on this as well. She always got some words of wisdom she want to share. Nephew, and you want any last words you want to say before we head up out of here?
I thought it was a good podcast, and thanks for the information.
Anytime, nephew. I appreciate you whenever you join me. I appreciate my brother. He's in the chat right here with me. So I will be back, and I will be black. I gotta go. Much love. May the great mother bring us together in the love of her. Peace. I gotta go. I'm outie. Peace.